Story time about how the big mama of my family pretty much let the whole family down and let her husband take over. Trigger warning, there was a lot of sexual abuse going on. So this is my dad's side of the family. I want to start out by saying his side is from New Jersey and Philadelphia. I don't know at what point my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather decided to move down here to Florida, but they did, which pretty much made the family even smaller. It was them and their 7 kids. They up and they moved to a city in Florida called Kissimmee. They owned a house out there and it was pretty much just them. Now, family from Philly and Jersey would come and visit, but I only knew them. Now, the person that I'm referring to is Big Mama. Her name is Aunt Dee Dee. She was the second oldest girl. She was pretty much the glue of the family once my mom died. And now my mom is my great-grandma, which is Dee Dee's mom. Aunt Dee Dee's older sister, Gloria, she was like really bougie and stuck up. So she really wasn't fit out to be the glue of the family. And now the youngest sister, which is Carol, which is my grandmother, she was young, wild, whipping and running the streets. And y'all know what hit in the 80s that destroyed a lot of black homes. So like I mentioned, my grandma was young and running the streets, and now she had my aunt, my dad, and my uncle. Unfortunately, she wasn't really there to take care of them. So my mom, which is my great-grandmother, which is their grandmother, took care of them a lot, along with Aunt Dee Dee, which is their first aunt. My Aunt Dee Dee also had children. She had 2 daughters. Her oldest daughter she had in a previous relationship, and then her youngest daughter she had in her current relationship. So my dad was a wild teenager. And it was a little bit too much for his grandmother, which is my great-grandmother, to take care of. She was getting older and it was a lot. So Aunt Dee Dee took him pretty much into her home and took care of him. My dad then went off to prison when he was 17 years old, and that was that. This is going to be the first incident where my Aunt Dee Dee's husband touched somebody in the family. My dad has a little sister, which is my aunt. Her name is Latia. Well, as I mentioned, my grandmother's ripping and running the streets. And my Aunt Latia, she went to stay with my Aunt Dee Dee for one summer. And while she stayed there, Aunt Dee Dee's husband, his name is Kenny, he started touching her. My aunt never went into details with me about what happened, but I pretty much got the gist of what she was saying. My aunt says she told my Aunt Dee Dee, and that was pretty much it. She really didn't hear much from it. She really didn't want to go back for the next summer or back to their house, period. Now, like I mentioned, my Aunt Latia was the first victim. There's 3 victims in this story, and it possibly could be more. This is where the second victim comes into play. Now, the second victim is my Aunt Dee Dee's daughter, her first daughter. The one that I told you guys that she had in a previous relationship. So this would be Aunt Dee Dee's husband, Kenny's stepdaughter. This is also my Aunt Latia's little cousin. Her name is Deani. Now, this wasn't just any summer visit. They actually lived in a home together, so I assumed it happened more frequently. I also know it wasn't just touching, it was deeper than that, and y'all know what I'm talking about. Well, my cousin spoke up to her mom about what was going on, and instead of her mom taking her word for it, believing her, Aunt Dee Dee sends her to live with her father in North Carolina to pretty much just shut her up and like get her out of the house. Now, at this point, everybody thinks that Aunt Dee Dee's husband is weird. Her mom, her dad, her siblings, pretty much everybody. What I also found out was they stayed in Orlando. So Orlando is about 30 minutes away from Kissimmee. And the reason for them staying in Orlando is because that's where Kenny's side of the family's from. His side of the family's from Winter Garden. He also wanted to stay in Orlando to keep Aunt Dee Dee away from her family in Kissimmee. At times, he would cut off communication. And later, I found out that he was not only emotionally abusing her, but physically. So now this is where I come into play. My mom got her children taken away when I was only a baby. My dad was in and out of prison, so there was no way that I was going to go and live with him. So my great-grandmother took me in, which is Aunt Dee Dee's mom. And like I said, same situation with my dad. She was like really old. Well, the next person after her that I went to was my Aunt Dee Dee. I was living with my Aunt Dee Dee from as young as I can remember, pretty much like 3 years old. I was the only child in the house. Like I mentioned, she had 2 daughters, but the oldest daughter is 20 years older than me, and the youngest daughter is 13 years older than me. So they're young adults, and I'm the baby in the house. Life was going great up until I want to say I was probably like 11 years old. When I say I had everything, my Aunt Dee Dee wasn't rich. She worked at a call center, but I never went without. I didn't have like the best of the best things, but it was manageable. I always had gifts under the tree for Christmas. She always took me to do photo shoots in Walmart. My birthday's in the first of the month when rent is due, but she always made sure to always get me a cake and a gift. Everything was everything. Now this is when things started to change. I would always notice Kenny and Deani, the oldest daughter, I would always notice them arguing around the house. Like, it's like they hated each other. And I always used to think, like, why do they not like each other? Mind you, her sister is his actual daughter, so they got along great. But it was just something between them two. Like, he could not stand her and she could not stand him. At the time, I'm still a child. I don't know what's going on. Now, this is something important to remember. Now, Kenny had a scar on his arm, and it looked like it had healed, but it was huge. As a kid, you're curious, you want to know. So I remember asking him, what happened to your arm? He told me when he was younger, he was playing football. He went over a fence, and the fence like cut him open, and that was that. Now, remember that part. So like I said, the sisters, they were older. They eventually started having kids. Deani had her daughter first, and Delisa, which is the younger sister, she eventually had a daughter. I was 7 when Deani's daughter was born, and I want to say I was maybe like 10 or 11 when Delisa's daughter was born. And of course, I was like the Cinderella of the house. I had to bathe the kids, feed the kids, watch the kids, look after the kids, clean up after the kids. And little did I know, this is when Kenny started to play mind games and try to get in my head. Now, any little thing that I didn't do right, he would start physically abusing me. Not with a belt, not with a shoe. This was like something I really don't even want to go into detail with. But just know, most of the times I've had fractured arms, fractured legs. He's bust veins in my eyes. Mind you, I'm still under the age of 10. This is why I say he started manipulating me, because when I would get these so-called whoopings, instead of him, like, you know, whooping me even though he shouldn't be because he's not even my real uncle, he would take advantage of the fact that, okay, I'm going to make her take all of her clothes off and I'm going to, you know, whoop her. But as I'm whooping her, I'm going to look at her. So I guess he figured the more I could find a reason to whoop her, the more I could get her to take her clothes off. And, you know, it was just weird. So now we're on to the next level of abuse. And now all of these things, like, they gradually get worse and worse and worse. Next, I'm 10 years old, and this is when he starts to touch me. He would come in my room when my aunt was sleeping. Like I said, she worked at a call center. I remember she had to be to work 7 in the morning and she would get off 6 at night. So he would come in my room while we were both sleeping and he would touch me. Well, the next day he would do nice things like take me to Disney's Pleasure Island. Now, if you're from Orlando, you know what that is. It's pretty much just like a, I don't know how to explain it, like a free Disney that you could just walk around in. After we leave there, he would take me to get food and he would act like nothing pretty much happened. Well, that went on for a few months. And the next level was him just touching me and then like being super rude to me afterwards. Now, every time that I knew that he was about to do this, I would be boohoo crying every single time. I want to say about 6 to 8 months later, I finally got the courage to tell my Aunt Didi. I had a track phone that she had gotten me to take to school so I can call her and stuff like that. And I remember texting her, and I texted her and said, he touched me. She immediately asked where were her daughters when he did that. I told her that one was in the shower and one had already gone to work. Mind you, he was that sneaky. For that day and the next day, she was completely on my side. I don't know what him and her talked about, but I do remember him getting in his car and he left. Like, he left for 2 days to be exact. She wanted to know every detail and she really felt sorry for me at that point. Now, this is when I found out what he had did to her daughter, Deani. Once Deani found out that it had happened to me is when she opened up to me about everything. Now, do y'all remember about that scar I told y'all about on his arm? This is when I found out that Deani did that to him because he was touching her. Deani told me she had got a knife and she had did that to him and she ran out of the house. This is when everything started coming together. After that second day, it's like he came home and my aunt changed. She didn't believe a word I had told her. In fact, she said in my face, cried, and she was angry, and she told me that I was trying to ruin her family. Now, through all of this, Deani was the only person on my side, but it was only so much she could do because she was still staying under her mother's roof. The younger sister, Delisa, she really didn't have like much to say in it because that's her dad and she really didn't know what's going on. It had never happened to her. Come back for part 2. Okay, so this is part 2 on how the big mama of my family let her husband touch the girls in the family. So like I said, for 2 days she believed me. After that, it's like she acted like nothing had happened. She told me I was trying to ruin her family and she really didn't speak much about it after that. He came back home, acted like nothing had happened, and he didn't touch me for about a week. After that week, it was back to the same routine. He would get up in the middle of the night and touch me. While she was at work, he would do things to me. And he even told me that if I tell somebody about this again, he's going to off me. So at this point, y'all know I'm scared as hell. I'm not going to lie. I already done told somebody. She basically didn't do anything about it, didn't believe me. If I tell somebody again, I'm going to, lose my life. Like, I was like, yeah, no. So I was pretty much on mute. Well, both of her daughters ended up getting their own place to stay. We stayed on the west side of Orlando, so the youngest daughter, she got an apartment probably like 5-8 minutes up the road. And then their oldest daughter, she got an apartment maybe about 15 minutes away from our house. When I say I found any reason on the weekends to go to their house, like I mentioned, I was always looking after their kids. I did everything for their kids. Bottles, fed them, bathe them, anything. I did not care what I had to do. I didn't care. I just wanted to be at their house. So I would always go to Delisa's house a lot. Mind you, Delisa's the youngest one. She's young. She got a free babysitter. So she didn't really care. But my Aunt Didi would only let me go over there on the weekends or when I didn't have school. So during the week, of course, I had to be there with him. And like I said, they both moved out. So it's literally just her, him, and me staying in the house. She's always at work majority of the time. So y'all know what that means. The abuse got even worse. And it went from just touching to y'all know. And with her being at work majority of the day, I got out of school before she got out of work. So he had all the time in the world to do this to me. It went on every single day. Sometimes twice a day. It was like he was always watching me around the house. I literally would get home from school. I would go and take a shower. And immediately as I would open the bathroom door, he'll grab my arm and just start shoving me in his room to do, what he would do. He was super aggressive all the time. So this went on for a year straight every day. At this point, I hate my life. I'm in middle school and I'm not really a bad kid, but I'm starting to get in trouble in school. I remember it got to the point where I got suspended from school. And of course, when you get suspended, you have to stay home. I didn't even want to be home. So I came to school while I was suspended and I ended up getting arrested for trespassing on a school campus. And this is where my long rap sheet of charges start. I hated being there. So this is when things are about to start to get good. It's the end of my 7th grade year and I found out I have to go to summer school. So every day I would get home from summer school and of course it would be the same, sexual abuse going on every day after school. And he's to the point where after he does whatever he does to me, he's putting his hands on me for nothing. And when I say for nothing, I say that to say you're already abusing me in this way. Now you're physically abusing me and along with verbally abusing me. And I did nothing to you. All I remember is going to summer school one day and I was so scared of the fact that when I left summer school that day, I would have to be walking back into this same dungeon, as I would call it, and it was just never going to stop. Also, by this point, my Aunt Didi was evil. She was verbally abusive and she was also physically abusive. Like I said, I'm in middle school, and I remember one time I took out my hair at my cousin Delisa's house and I flat ironed it. And when I got to her house, my Aunt Didi's house, she took my head, pushed it in the sink to get my curls back, and she beat me, punched me in the face, and did a whole bunch of stuff, all because she didn't want me touching my hair. She would always say things like, if you don't want to stay here, you sure don't want to go to foster care because that's where you're going to go. It was to the point, if I would act up in school, which I did a lot, she would take away my cell phone privileges of talking to my parents. My dad was in prison and he would call a lot for me. And if I acted up in school, she would let him know, hey, she acted up. She can't talk to you. This is how I started to know, like, she has to know what's going on, because it's almost like she hates me, and she knows the type of person her husband is, because not only did it happen to her niece already, it happened to her daughter, and now it's happening to her great niece, and she's practically just ignoring me and acting like I'm doing something wrong to her. So like I said, that day at summer school, I was adamant on I'm not going home. I went to the school office, I picked up their phone, and I dialed my mom's phone number, my biological mom. All I told her was that Kenny is touching me and I don't want to stay there anymore. She told me to hold on and that she was going to try to get in contact with her brother and see what she could do, because my mom stayed out of state at the time. She ended up calling her brother, which is my uncle, and he was about 45 minutes out. Mind you, school was about to end. So she called my grandmother, which is my grandmother Carol, my dad's mom. And at the time, my grandmother and my aunt Latia, they stayed together. They also stayed in Orlando. So they sped to me. Only thing is, they were going to be to me probably after he would come and pick me up from school. I just remember him pulling up to the school to come and get me, and I was like in the office and I was crying and I was telling the office people I can't go home with him. He waited for a little bit and then he got out of the car to come in the office to ask them, hey, where is such and such? You know, where is she? She hasn't came out to the car to go home yet. The school office played along with it and they were like, you know, she's not here. At this point, he pulls off, but he's still parked in front of the school, I assume to wait for me to come out of the school or to figure out where I was at. I then went to the back of the school campus and jumped 2 gates to get into the neighborhood that was right by the school. I had a friend who lived right by the school, so I went to her house and she wasn't home, but her grandma was home, and I asked her grandma, could I use her phone and could I sit on the porch until my aunts and my grandma came and got me. My aunt and my grandma pulled up and we left. My aunt was telling me that she doesn't think that she could bring me to her house because there's going to be a lot of chaos going on in the family, and she knows that my Aunt Dee Dee might come there and look for me. That was okay because my mom's brother, my uncle, he was close and he was coming to get me. Well, he was in the middle of working, so I couldn't stay with him, so he dropped me off to his house with his wife. When I got there, his wife was the sweetest person ever. When I told her, you know, what was going on, she immediately drove me back to Orlando because they lived in Point Siena. She drove me back to Orlando and we went to the police station and we started, a report. The police asked me so many questions. They transported me from the station to like a detective's office. And at this point, they were ready to start an investigation. I want to say about 2 or 3 weeks after that, he was arrested. In between all of this, I was jumping from my uncle's house to my aunt's house on my mom's side and just all around until eventually I ended up going to foster care. So now when I'm in foster care is when the trial is starting for his case. He did decide to take it to trial. This is when I found out that he had did that to my aunt. And how I found that out was because along with me testifying, my aunt wanted to testify and my cousin, who he also did that to. So all 3 of us were going to testify against him. Well, my cousin got scared of her mom. I don't know what her mom told her. I did find out her mom might have told her, like, if you do this, I'm never going to talk to you again or something like that. And she backed out. She didn't want to testify at that point. I also found out that it might be another girl in another state that he also did this to before he got in a relationship with my Aunt Dee Dee. So ever since I had moved out of that house, I have always been scared for my little cousin, which is Deani's daughter, which is his step granddaughter. I've always been scared for her to be around him, to basically live the same life that I had to live, because that's not his biological granddaughter, just like I wasn't his biological niece, just like Deani wasn't his biological daughter, and just like my aunt wasn't his biological niece. Mind you, he was released from jail, so this is why I've always been scared for her to grow up in the house. And still to this day, I am pretty much scared for her to be there. When I talk to my Aunt Latia, she does tell me, like, oh, Deani's daughter's grown up to be very beautiful. I think by now she's like 15 years old. And I always just ask, like, is she left there by herself? I always just wonder because he's not going to stop, clearly.